ESPN is now going toe-to-toe. They've officially put the gloves on against the Big 12. Yesterday, Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, wrote a scathing cease and desist letter to ESPN. ESPN responded in the last 45 minutes or so, officially on their website. Here's what it says. On Wednesday, the Big 12 Conference sent a legal letter to ESPN that was without merit. This afternoon, ESPN replied to the conference with the following letter. Dear Bob, this responds to your letter dated July 28th, 2021. The accusations you have made are entirely without merit, apart from a single vague allegation that ESPN has been, quote, actively engaged in discussions with at least one other unnamed conference, which ESPN disputes. Your letter consists entirely of unsubstantiated speculation and legal conclusions. To be clear, ESPN has engaged in no wrongful conduct, and thus there is nothing to, quote, cease and desist. We trust this will put the matter to rest. ESPN reserves all rights and remedies in connection with this matter. Sincerely, Burke Magnus. That is from ESPN. Now, this is kind of fascinating because I told you this is what I thought would happen. Let me explain the Big 12's argument, okay? This is where a lot of times I like to pretend, I say I put my lawyer hat on, and I'll walk you through the arguments as such, okay? Here's what the Big 12 is saying. ESPN, you are signed to a contract with us until 2025. That's 4 years more. You have decided in the Big 12's rendition of facts here that Texas and Oklahoma can leave this conference and they are going to the SEC, and you are paying them more money to leave the Big 12, breach our contract in 2025, and you are then further encouraging other members of our our conference to look elsewhere and go play elsewhere. And in doing so, you could be guilty of tortious interference with existing contracts, or I think a better angle is just to accuse them of breaching a fiduciary duty that they owe under the contract. And let me explain what I mean by that. This is, again, me wearing my lawyer hat. If you enter into a contract with someone else, and then by your own actions, you cause that existing contract to be in many ways null and void, then you are breaching your fiduciary duty. You could make an argument that by providing additional money to Texas and Oklahoma, that ESPN is helping to induce them to leave the Big 12 and go to the SEC. Because again, the ESPN is providing the money that would make Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12. Okay? That's the argument I think that the Big 12 can make against ESPN. Remember, the SEC is not paying money to Texas and Oklahoma. ESPN is paying the SEC, and that money then goes to Texas and Oklahoma. So ESPN is a contracting party with both the SEC and the Big 12, and arguably, this is the Big 12's perspective, you can argue that ESPN is breaching its duty to the Big 12 by providing incentive for two Big 12 members to join the SEC, which is undercutting the entire premise of the Big 12 conference. Now, that is why I have said for a long time, now let me flip the script, okay? That's the argument of the Big 12. The argument of ESPN would be, we didn't have anything to do with this. Texas and Oklahoma decided they wanted to go to a better conference. We happen to have a relationship with the SEC. We have existing contractual relationships with the SEC in the event that there is conference realignment. We have provided for compensation. But the SEC makes the choice about whether or not Texas or Oklahoma are playing in the SEC or not. We have nothing to do with that. The SEC gets an application for admission from Texas, Oklahoma. They then take it to their respective conference presidents and allow all of those presidents to vote on whether or not to extend an offer to Texas and Oklahoma. Only then do we become obligated to give any money to the SEC. That is an SEC decision. We're staying out of it. We aren't involved in this process at all. That's the argument from ESPN. Now, the argument that I have made, I haven't seen very many people make this argument, but I think it's true, is I think that ESPN is on the hook to have to pay the existing 8 members of the Big 12 the same amount of money if they go in for a new television contract at minimum, because ESPN wants to avoid any lawsuit alleging potentially billions of dollars in damages over conference realignment. Now, I think I understand these parameters better than almost anybody. So what I would say here is Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 has to be careful, because what he's trying to do is keep his existing 8 members from going elsewhere, and he's trying to keep ESPN from being involved in aiding or abetting those 8 members in going elsewhere. But also, he doesn't really have any strong options, because once he files a lawsuit against ESPN, it would be pretty stunning if ESPN said, hey, you know what, we want to be in business with the Big 12 going forward, and ESPN might be wondering about that already. So this is a messy situation. Now, there are reports that the American Athletic Conference has been reaching out and trying to get the members of the Big 12 to join the AAC. That makes sense, because if the Big 12 ever gets its sea legs and starts to be able to stand up, what would probably make the most sense financially is for the Big 12 to go try to get some of the American Athletic Conference members or other schools and put together 10 conference schools again and argue, hey, ESPN and Fox, we expect the same number of dollars even without Texas and Oklahoma. Now, that's a hard sell, but if you went to get Colorado State, Boise State, Cincinnati, Memphis, Central Florida, whatever it is, Houston, and I'm not trying to leave out any schools, you could pick a couple of those schools. But the American is afraid of its best value teams being stolen away by the Big 12, and so it is now trying to act and create a mega conference. Now, some people are saying, well, ESPN doesn't want to pay $1 billion going forward for the Big 12, and so they hope the conference breaks up. I disagree with that a little bit, because if the Big 12 breaks up, I think ESPN, even if they went to the American Conference, ESPN is still going to have to end up paying each of those schools something, because otherwise they're going to sue and say ESPN cost us $1 billion. This is a delicate spot. I think there's lots of lawyers involved right now. I don't know what kind of written record there might be, if it exists, of ESPN involvement in conference realignment. Remember, all the time ESPN would be having conversations. I do know this. Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, as Mike Slive was as well, says, he's never contacted anybody in the Big 12. Texas and Oklahoma reached out to him and let it be known that they wanted to leave the Big 12. Would the SEC have interest? And that's how this process began. It was a Texas and Oklahoma-driven decision, not an SEC-driven decision. And oh, by the way, right now, the plan seems to be that Texas and Oklahoma would stay until 2025, when this contract runs out and their grant of rights runs out, and then go to the SEC. We'll see whether or not those 4 years end up taking place inside the Big 12 for Texas and Oklahoma, or whether they go away sooner rather than later.